My name is Jackson Reed, and I was in the middle of a secure Pentagon briefing when my father-in-law, retired police captain Walter Granger, kicked in the door, holstered pistol visible, handcuffs raised like I was a suspect. The digital map on the screen shimmered with red dots marking hostile positions, satellite feeds whirring in real time, and every eye in the room snapped toward the swinging door. I stood frozen in full uniform, crisp creases in my tactical slacks, pressed dress shirt under body armor, headset still snug over my ear. Classified documents scrolled across the monitor. A collective hush fell, broken only by the mechanical hiss of the projection system. Walter didn't ask questions, he made an arrest. "You're not a real officer," he barked, his voice echoing off the steel-reinforced walls. His gaze never wavered from my chest, as if he looked for a hidden badge beneath my nameplate. His hand wrapped around my wrist, twisting my arm behind my back, and the cold metal of the cuffs pressed into my skin. He thought I was a fraud. He didn't know what was coming. Because when he snapped those cuffs, Protocol Echo activated. 5 black SUVs were already inbound. My heart hammered and I fought to keep my voice calm. "Captain Granger," I said, swallowing the sting of betrayal, "this is a secure federal facility." His boot slammed against the table, rattling coffee cups and sending classified folders skittering across the conference room. He ignored me, yanked me forward. My colleagues froze in place, some staring in disbelief, others reaching for their sidearms. The air crackled with tension. My training kicked in. Assess threat, maintain composure, secure reaction. I took a breath and tested the cuffs. They were standard issue patrol grade, nothing on par with the military lockouts I'd designed into my clearance protocols. I used that moment to glance at the console beside me, where a single red LED pulsed beside a key labeled Protocol Echo. It had been my idea, an emergency override to bring immediate extraction under hostile or compromised conditions. Now the symbol for wrong access detected flashed on each operator's screen. Within seconds, the map display receded and was replaced with a notification, Echo Protocol engaged. Extraction in progress. Walter yanked me into the center of the room, nearly toppling a junior officer who tried to intervene. "Hands behind your back," he snarled. I complied, mindful that any sudden movement could escalate the situation further. My breathing was slow, my mind racing through rules of engagement. I could see the command staff exchange glances. General Macklin's jaw tightened. Commander Ishiro's eyes flicked toward the emergency phone array. They knew what would happen next. Within 2 minutes, the distant rumble of engines reached us, growing louder by the second. Security teams assembled behind bullet-resistant glass, weapons raised and calibrated for friendly identification. I could feel the vibrations in the floor panels. The door behind me splintered again. This time the team was breaking in. Walter froze, his grip faltering. His instincts told him to press the advantage. Mine told me to hold steady until reinforcements confirmed my identity. The lead security officer stormed in, rifle trained but voice steady. "Sir, step away from Major Reed," he said, his authority absolute. "Deputy Director of Joint Operations, Major Jackson Reed, active clearance level Omega 7. The room held its collective breath as the officer produced his credentials. Walter's face went pale beneath the crimson flush of anger and embarrassment. He stared at the officer's badge, backpedaled until the wall supported him. His eyes flicked to mine, then to the 5 SUVs now parked outside the reinforced bay doors. He mumbled the only words that came to his lips: "He's not real. He's a fraud." That moment was a pivot point, his disbelief colliding with the unassailable power of federal authority. He hadn't just interrupted a briefing. He had trespassed on a Level 1 operation, breached the sanctity of national security protocol. The lead officer unclipped his cuffs and handed them to a support specialist. I rubbed my wrist where the metal had bitten, but no mark remained. My colleagues exhaled in unison. The satellite feeds flickered back to life, the red dots returned, and the briefing resumed as though the interruption had been a training exercise. Walter backed out of the room, escorted by 2 officers, still handcuffed but escorted with professional restraint. He looked like a man dethroned, pride fractured, reputation crumbling. Alara's wide-eyed silhouette appeared at the threshold, tears catching the fluorescent light. I caught her gaze for a single heartbeat before turning back to the screen. The emergency notification vanished, replaced once more by tactical overlays and drone-fed video. My headset beeped. "Major Reed, secure line re-established. Proceeding with Operation Sentinel." I touched the confirmation icon, and the room refocused on the mission, tracking hostile cell movements inside hostile territory. I leaned forward, voice steady, relaying coordinates, relighting the spark of shared purpose in every eye around me. Behind me, the door clicked shut, sealing us in. The echo of spinning tires faded into quiet. I felt the weight of every glance, respect earned and validated. I answered the questions I was asked, crisp and clear, confident in my credentials. When the briefing concluded, I gathered my notes and adjusted my uniform. Alara slipped in beside me, her hand finding mine. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her presence was affirmation enough. Later, before I exited the facility, I watched through the corridor window as Walter sat in an interrogation room, handcuffed to the table. His shoulders slumped. The same man who once lectured me on what made a real officer now sat powerless. Protocol Echo had done more than extract me. It had exposed the truth about power, authority, and validation. What he didn't realize was that real power doesn't depend on someone else's approval. It simply answers the door when the moment demands it. And sometimes, that answer comes in 5 black SUVs. I met Walter when I was dating his daughter Alara. Back then, I was the guy in logistics, and he never let me forget it. The Army's great, but real men enforce law on the streets, he'd say. Alara would laugh it off, but I knew the truth. Walter only respected uniforms he used to wear. When I was promoted, he rolled his eyes. When I got top secret clearance, he got louder. Must be a diversity hire, he joked once. That's when I stopped laughing. I tried to shrug it off, but his words stuck, echoing in my mind during midnight watch rotations and long convoy runs. Our relationship had started the way many did, with shy smiles over coffee and long conversations about duty and honor. My focus on strategic supply lines and secure communication channels fascinated me, while Alara's stories of community outreach and crisis mediation captivated her father's admiration. Yet, Walter's respect was a fortress I had no code to breach. He questioned every detail of my background, where I'd gone to school, which officers had vouched for me, even the stitching on my uniform. Every tactical decision I made seemed to him a sign of inexperience, every commendation a bureaucratic footnote rather than a testament to my skill. Each holiday, each family dinner rehearsed the same scene. He'd lean in with a question about my orders, my missions, my motives. I'd answer carefully, knowing one misstep would become fodder for the next lecture about how military men don't need parental approval. Alara would slide in beside me with a wink, whispering a private joke or a word of encouragement in my ear. I'd smile, grateful for her, but beneath the surface I craved her father's nod of approval more than anything. I arranged my uniform with extra care, matched every button and ribbon precisely, hoping his silence would one day turn to pride. It wasn't until the day I received my top-secret clearance that his teasing turned to something darker. I mailed the acceptance letter home with trembling hands, proud I'd earned the highest level. When I arrived that evening, he met me in the driveway, uncapped a beer, and tapped the envelope with his fingertip. Security clearance, huh? That's so you can play dress-up in classified documents. I laughed it off, but when I went inside, I found the letter crumpled in the trash. I fished it out, smoothing the pages with shaking fingers. The endorsement stamped in red ink declared me vetted at the Department of Defense's most confidential tier. I slotted the letter into my jacket pocket and faced him in the living room. He didn't apologize. He just stared at the floorboards. Alara saw me later in our apartment, pacing the hardwood floor. She touched my arm. Did he? And I nodded, voice catching in my throat. She held me as I swallowed back the sting. I'm so sorry, she said. He worries. I wanted to believe her, but I felt the shift in our partnership. Each time we walked into his territory, I felt like an enemy in the war room, a tactical briefing I'd never be invited to attend. I began to avoid family gatherings, preferring short visits to protracted conversations. Alara insisted I stay longer, argued I was part of the family, but Walter's presence forced my exit. I'd kiss Alara at the door, mumble something about an early briefing, and leave before the night deepened. She never understood why I couldn't stay. He'll come around, she'd say, reaching for my hand in the car. My silence responded better than any argument. Then came the promotion to Deputy Director of Joint Operations. It was a milestone I'd dreamed of since my first day in uniform. I had navigated combat zones and complex alliances, volatile negotiations and midnight extractions, yet nothing compared to my desire to stand shoulder to shoulder with Walter in shared pride. When the official announcement came, I invited the Grangers to the ceremony. He accepted with a curt nod. But at the podium, as I recited my oath, I felt the absence of his pride acutely. In the crowd, his face was still unreadable, a silent verdict beneath folding flags and polished metals. It stung more than any battlefield setback. I had weathered rocket fire and improvised explosive devices, held my nerve under direct attack, but I couldn't navigate the one man whose respect I craved most. I retreated into work, burying long hours in satellite arrays and secure communications. I convinced myself that validation from generals and defense secretaries would suffice. But each handshake with a superior paled compared to the elusive nod I never received from Walter. Our engagement party was the breaking point. Alara's smile radiated beneath strings of fairy lights as she introduced me to guests, praised my career, and beamed with pride. Yet her father cornered me behind the makeshift bar, beer in hand. "Logistics won't save you when lives are on the line," he said, tone heavy. "Don't hitch your future to a desk job." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at him, fury pulsing beneath my calm. "My desk job saves lives," I said. He laughed. "Not real lives. Real men do real work on the streets." I realized then that respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned in 1,000 unseen moments. Walter had built a fortress around his principles, but he had also built a wall between us. I decided to shift my focus from proving myself to him to embracing the man I had become. I would lead with integrity, compassion, and competence. If he chose to recognize me someday, it would be because he saw the substance beneath the uniform. I picked up the phone and called my commander, outlining a new operation plan with unwavering confidence. Alara's voicemail flashed. She'd called 10 times. I let it ring. I sat at my desk, the city lights blinking below, and made a silent promise. I would stand tall in my own conviction, regardless of whether Walter acknowledged it. I would be Major Jackson Reed, and someday he would truly recognize me as such. Moving in with Alara's parents should have been a simple, temporary arrangement. Our condo was under renovation, and Alara thought a few weeks under her mother's roof would be convenient. I agreed, fully aware of the unspoken hierarchy I was stepping into. Walter's domain was sacrosanct. Every inch of the Granger residence bore his stamp, from the gleaming walnut floors to the collection of retired service pistols displayed in the study. I knew better than to question his routines, but I had no way of anticipating how his silent suspicions would erupt. I cleared my gear into the guest room with methodical calm, stacking encrypted tablets and secure comms equipment in locked Pelican cases. The Pentagon demanded I maintain a live connection for an ongoing operation, satellite uplinks, encrypted VoIP, remote drone feeds. I set up the secure line in the corner, threading a Cat6 cable through the wall conduit and hiding the black box behind a bookshelf borrowed from the basement. The red light facing me, the universal "do not disturb" signal, glowed like a warning beacon that only I was meant to see. Alara breezed into the room with her usual warmth, wrapping her arms around me. "This is ridiculous," she said, pressing her cheek to my shoulder. "You're like Fort Knox in here." I smiled, appreciating her attempt at lightness. "Just drive time efficiency," I said, securing a cable. She rolled her eyes with the affectionate exasperation I loved. "Okay, General Logistics," she teased. Then her face softened. "Thank you for doing this." I hugged her back, letting her presence calm my nerves. I'd accepted this compromise for her sake, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd brought a storm into her childhood home. Walter, however, had no concept of boundaries. On the first morning after our arrival, I found sticky notes around the house, names circled, acronyms misspelled, jottings like 0725, JTC, and "Who's Colonel Ramirez?" I wiped one off the coffee maker while pouring coffee, noticing Walter's scrawl. "Check this." My fingers tightened around the mug. I reminded myself, remain professional. Alara insisted he was just curious, but I recognized the hunting glint in his handwriting. Later that afternoon, I used downtime between briefings to step into the hallway and retrieve the coffee stain on my cuff. That's when I saw him. Walter stood by my door, peering through the crack around the frame. His posture was rigid, chest thrust forward, hands clasped behind his back. The red light on my doorknob blinked once, twice, as if pulsing in defiance of his intrusion. I didn't startle. Years of field craft taught me to recognize stakes by their subtleties, the angle of his head, the tension in his shoulders. He was probing. He wasn't waiting for an invitation. I stepped forward, voice even. "Captain Granger, please respect the red light." His reaction was a brief flicker of annoyance. His jaw tightened and his eyes narrowed. He straightened and folded his arms. "Red light? What's going on in there?" he demanded. I pointed at the glowing LED. "Secure operation in progress." I can't have interruptions. He sniffed dismissively, shifting weight onto one leg. You're working on secret things in my daughter's home? I squared my shoulders. I have clearance. It's Pentagon protocol. He eyed my door like it was a barricade in an urban siege. Pentagon protocol doesn't apply here. I felt the gravity of escalation. It does, sir. He took a step toward me, but I held firm. This room is protected federal property during active operations. Walter's mouth twisted in a sneer. You call this home? I call it hiding something. I realized then that logic would not persuade him. He believed every intrusion was his right. Over the next 24 hours, I found more signs of his investigation, a call log left open on the kitchen counter, timestamps scribbled in his handwriting. My encrypted tablet moved from the desk to the dining table. A printout of my last assignment dropped into the recycling bin. Each act felt like a breach of trust, a calculated encroachment into territory I'd fortified with far more than bolts and locks. Alara claimed he didn't mean harm, but I could see her eyes betray a flicker of fear. She worried for me, and a sliver of guilt cut through my professional detachment. That evening, I barricaded the door from the inside, nothing more elaborate than wedging a chair under the knob, but the gesture felt necessary. Alara watched me from the doorway, concern etched on her face. You don't have to face him alone, she said softly. I shook my head. I need to show him these measures are non-negotiable. She bit her lip, torn between loyalty and love. Promise me you'll be careful. I touched her cheek. Always. I settled into my chair, the red light illuminating my silhouette against the wall. The secure link beeped. Major read, incoming intel update. As I jacked in the feed, the room hummed with encoded transmissions. Drone coordinates, encrypted voice patches, satellite metadata zipped through the line. Every packet a lifeline to ongoing operations. I kept one eye on the door, expecting Walter's shadow any second. But the only visitor that night was the faint thump of a passing patrol vehicle outside. Sleep came in short bursts. Each time I drifted into unconsciousness, my mind replayed every encounter with Walter. The jut of his chin, the narrowing of his eyes, the certainty that he was a man whose mission was to unearth whatever I buried. In the pre-dawn quiet, I rose and inspected the door. The chair had shifted slightly. Someone had tested the barricade. I pressed my ear to the wood, listened for movement in the corridor. Silence. I exhaled, hands pressed to the cool surface. This intrusion, this act of suspicion, felt like an assault on my identity. I devoted years to securing national defense, navigating hostile negotiations, and safeguarding classified operations. Here, in what was supposed to be sanctuary, I was reduced to a suspect. I realized deep down that Walter's distrust came not only from paternal protectiveness but from fear. Fear that I wielded a power he could not comprehend, wielded it without his sanction. When dawn finally broke, warming the curtains of the guest room, I opened the door. Walter stood across the hallway, coffee in hand, his gaze guarded. He said nothing. I held my posture, waiting. After a long moment, he turned and walked away without a word. The gesture stung more than any confrontation, his acknowledgement that he could not cross this threshold. I returned to my desk and powered up the monitor. The operation briefing resumed as though nothing had happened. Coordinates shifted on the map, new directives scrolled by, and the red light pulsed, a reminder that some lines could never be crossed. I tapped into the feed and relayed my assessment, voice calm, unwavering. Later that day, Alara slipped into the room again, placing a hand on my shoulder. He backed off, she said quietly. I nodded, appreciating the small victory. He knows this isn't a game. She wrapped her arms around me. I'm proud of you. I smiled into her hair, grateful for her faith. In the days that followed, Walter's surveillance tapered. The sticky notes vanished, and he stopped hovering in the hallway. He even greeted me in the morning with a curt nod instead of a question. I knew this truce would hold only if I maintained boundaries. The house would remain a home, but my room would forever be a secure enclave, protected by protocol and unwavering resolve. I glanced at the red light, its glow faint against the after. I saw Layla's eyes widen in disbelief, a cautious spark ignited deep within her. And in that moment, I knew we had rewritten the story of her place in the world. No longer the overlooked child, but the radiant center of her own unfolding adventure. Cynthia's Christmas parties were a spectacle of precision and polish, each detail curated to present the Hallberg family as paragons of taste and tradition. From the moment we stepped through those gilded doors, I felt the pull of performance. Manicured lawns trimmed to military exactness, wreaths hung at perfect height, and an army of staff scuttling in the background like well-trained shadows. Talia moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her laughter light as spun sugar, while I watched her in admiration and dread, admiration for her grace under scrutiny. Dread for the knowledge that every misstep I made would reverberate louder in this house than in any other. Layla clung to my hand as we entered the grand hall, her tiny frame dwarfed by soaring ceilings and sweeping staircases wrapped in garlands of evergreen and holly. The room pulsed with warm light, but the atmosphere felt brittle, as though a misplaced ornament might shatter the carefully maintained facade. The guests circulated in clusters, their smiles polite, their laughter measured, their compliments delivered with the precision of a choreographed dance. I spotted a cousin whispering behind a champagne flute, her eyes flicking toward us as though noting an anomaly in the tableau. My daughter's mismatched sweater and scuffed shoes a stark contrast to the sequin party dresses and patent leather loafers that surrounded us. We joined the receiving line, where Cynthia stood like a queen on her velvet throne, greeting each guest with a tailored remark. "Tom, how's the firm?" "Jean, love the color on you." Each greeting was pared down to its most felicitous form, free of extraneous warmth. When I reached her, she offered me a mechanical smile and said, "Malik, so glad you could join us. I hear you've been busy with the new school budget." I nodded, careful to phrase my answer succinctly, to convey competence without inviting further questions. Talia slipped her arm through mine, her smile unfaltering, and steered us down the line. Once introductions concluded, we drifted toward the buffet table, where a pastry chef arranged desserts like tiny sculptures. Layla's eyes widened at the sight of miniature gingerbread houses and intricately piped eclairs. I lifted her onto my hip so she could inspect the sugary display. She pointed at a tray of macarons in pastel hues and whispered, "Can I try one?" I smiled and selected two, one pistachio, one rose. She bit into the pistachio with reverent pleasure, her eyes closing as if she were savoring a rare delicacy. A nearby guest tooted softly, and I sensed disapproval over indulging a child so conspicuously. I pulled Layla close and whispered, "Enjoy it. This is your night, too." She grinned and pressed the macaron wrapper into my hand, then darted away to join a group of children playing beneath a crystal chandelier. I followed her to a small gathering of cousins clustered around a tray of finger sandwiches. They nibbled delicate cucumber triangles while discussing advanced placement courses and SAT prep, voices hushed with adult earnestness. Layla waited politely, her head tilted as she listened, then spoke up in her clear, melodic voice. "Do you think worms have friends?" The question halted the conversation like a dropped glass. Heads turned, collars straightened, and the children looked at her as though she had uttered a phrase in a foreign tongue. I hustled over, my cheeks burning. I whispered, "I'm sorry, sweetie. Let's go find something else," and offered her my hand. But she tugged the macaron wrapper from my grip and said, "It's okay, Daddy. I just thought they might." Even her curiosity felt defiant here. We drifted toward the center of the room, where a grand fir tree presided over the festivities. Beneath its branches, precisely stacked gifts reflected designer labels, Hermes, Burberry, Valentino, all arranged by color and size. Layla's gaze shifted from box to box. I knelt beside her and tucked a stray curl behind her ear. "They'll call your name soon," I whispered, though neither of us truly believed it. She offered a small, hopeful smile, then lifted her chin and surveyed the scene with the quiet dignity she carried even in the face of exclusion. The family portrait followed, a ritual wherein every Hallberg member assembled for the annual photograph. As we positioned ourselves before the camera, I felt Layla's hand tremble in mine. She clutched my fingers and whispered, "Will I be in it?" I smiled and squeezed back, trying to convey confidence. Behind us, Cynthia barked instructions, more to the left. "Chin up. Talia, straighten your skirt." In the commotion, Layla and I slipped to the side, our heads barely visible in the frame. I glanced at the photographer, who adjusted his lens without a second thought. I considered pulling Layla into the center, rewriting the script, but last year I would have. This year, I held back, learning the lesson that Talia's family taught so well. In their world, every move is calculated, every gesture codified. When the photographer clicked his final shot, a murmur of relief rippled through the group. People mingled again, returning to appetizers and small talk. The room hummed with the flicker of candlelight, and I realized my cheeks were damp with tears I dared not shed. Layla leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder. "Why do they make it so hard?" she asked, voice soft. I stroked her hair, my heart breaking. They don't know how special you are, I said. They're afraid of something they don't understand. She looked up at me with wide, trusting eyes. I'm not afraid, she replied. I'm just me. I pressed my lips to her forehead and whispered, exactly. Across the room, I saw Talia watching us, her expression unreadable. In that moment, I understood the weight she carried, juggling her loyalty to her family and her duty as a mother to protect our daughter. I straightened my shoulders and stood, taking Layla's hand. Come on, I said. Let's find your grandmother. She looked at me, puzzled, but allowed me to guide her. We approached Cynthia, who was engaged in conversation with two board members. I cleared my throat. And Cynthia? She turned, her smile clinical. Yes. I reached into my pocket and retrieved Layla's watercolor painting, a vibrant scene of family under a bright sky, with a tiny figure at the edge looking on. Cynthia's eyes flicked to it, then back to mine. She made this for you, I said. Her lips pressed thin as she accepted the gift. Layla hovered behind me, her eyes shining. It's very unique, Cynthia said, her tone flat. Layla's face fell, but I bent and whispered, thank you for accepting her gift. Cynthia nodded, and the moment was over. We retreated to a quiet corner, and I wrapped an arm around Layla as she exhaled. I'm proud of you, I told her. She leaned into me. Thank you for being with me, she whispered. In that crowded room full of curated perfection, we found an imperfect moment of truth. Love doesn't require an invitation, and belonging isn't determined by appearances. And though we still waited for the call that would never come, we knew our own values were richer than any box under that tree. Just as the last notes of carols faded and I was gathering our coats, ready to slip away from the performance of polite smiles and empty compliments, Talia rose from her seat with a quiet authority that rippled through the room. Conversation sputtered to a halt mid-sentence, and the soft clink of silver flatware on china paused as every eye turned toward her. My pulse skipped. This was the moment I'd sensed coming but could never have predicted in its full force. She reached into her purse and drew out an envelope, cream-colored and substantial, tied with a slender ribbon that glowed like a promise beneath the tree's twinkling lights. My breath caught as she placed it at Layla's feet, sliding into position with the deliberation of a chess grandmaster. For an instant, the world seemed to hold its breath. Even the firelight in the hearth flickered with anticipation. Guests shifted uneasily on plush velvet seats. Cynthia's perfectly arched brow rose an inch. My stomach nodded, and I knelt beside Layla, resting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Talia's voice was calm, steady, so steady that it seemed to echo in the sudden hush. This was supposed to be open last, she said, and the words landed like a verdict. Layla knelt, her small fingers trembling as she undid the ribbon, each loop sliding free with a soft whisper of fabric. She glanced at me, her eyes wide and questioning, and I nodded, voice caught in my throat. As she lifted the flap, the room leaned in closer, as if gravity itself had shifted toward that lone envelope. She withdrew 2 documents, holding them up so the golden glow of the Christmas lights flickered across their embossed seals. The first was a notarized certificate establishing an irrevocable education trust in her name, a fund seeded with an amount so substantial it would cover tuition at any school she chose, at home or abroad. Gasps fluttered like startled birds. I saw Cynthia's fingers twitch, the skin paling where her knuckles pressed against her palm. Layla, still kneeling, traced the words with her fingertip, her breath quick and shallow. I swallowed hard, my voice steady when I spoke. This is for your future, I said, and laid my hand gently over hers. Because we believe in you. Her curls brushed my cheek, and I felt the weight of every injustice she'd already endured. But there was more. Layla unfolded the second document, a property deed bearing Talia's signature and mine, declaring our ownership of a 3-bedroom home in a town 3 states away. The house we had admired under dusty afternoon sky, the one I had joked we could never afford. It stood there now in black and white, ours to claim when the new year began. A murmur rose as cousins exchanged shocked glances. Even the seasoned socialites looked uncertain, as though someone had slipped ashtrays beneath their pristine carpets. Talia's face was serene. She held Layla's gaze and said, "We're moving. New year. New life." The words landed softly but firmly, like stones tossed into a still pond, sending ripples through the room. My chest tightened as I surveyed the tableau. Families of privilege sputtering for a response, a grandmother's pride crumbling behind poker-faced restraint, and my daughter, our daughter, standing taller than any of them. Layla looked around, processing each stunned expression, then back at the documents in her hand. Her small voice trembled and yet rang clear. "Are you sure?" Talia nodded. Completely. I rose and slipped an arm around each of them, a single family in a room built for many. I felt a fierce protectiveness flare inside me, burning away years of quiet acceptance. We would chart our own course, far from this stage of forced admiration. Cynthia finally found her composure and offered a clipped, "Well, that's big news." Her tone was respectful but edged with something I'd never seen before, uncertainty. She glanced between the envelope at Layla's feet and the opulent tree towering overhead, then back at us, as though searching for the script she would have written for this scene. There was no script. Talia's smile remained calm as she tucked an arm through mine. "Thank you for celebrating with us," she said, and I knew those words were genuine. For once, the celebration was ours to define. As guests rose to offer cautious congratulations, I watched Layla's chest swell with pride. She slipped the documents into her coat pocket and slipped her hand into mine without letting go. When we left, there was no lingering to pick at crumbs of dessert or rehash awkward silences. We stepped into the crisp night air, the echo of fairy lights receding behind us. Layla tucked her other hand into her coat, clutching the envelope's ribbon as though it were a tether linking her to a new beginning. Talia exhaled, a long, steady release. "I couldn't let her fade into the background," she said softly. I kissed her temple and held her close. As we drove away, Layla leaned forward in the back seat, peering through the rear window at the glittering house that had been our prison of etiquette. She whispered, "I can't wait to see my new room." I turned in the seat, eyes gleaming with pride. "Neither can I," said. And just like that, the night became ours, a promise wrapped in courage, tied with love, and meant to be opened, last. We didn't wait for the after-party chatter to die down. The moment we closed the car door behind us, Layla leaned against the roof and traced the ribbon's twist between her fingers. I settled into the driver's seat, the engine's hum a warm blanket against the cold night. Talia slipped into the passenger seat, her fingers brushing mine as she opened her door. I could still feel the energy of the room, the stunned silence that had followed her announcement. But in the quiet of our car, the world felt different, lighter, brimming with possibility. Layla's voice came soft from the back seat. "What's an education trust, Daddy?" Her question was both innocent and profound. I glanced in the rearview mirror at her wide eyes framed by curls. "It's like a special piggy bank that can only be used for school," I explained. "For books, tuition, anything you need to learn and grow." She nodded, processing the concept with the careful seriousness she applied to everything. "And the house?" she asked. "Is it really ours?" I smiled. "It is. A place where you can run barefoot in the grass, paint on the walls, and never worry about who sees the mess you make." Talia reached around the seat and ruffled Layla's hair. "A fresh start," she said. "Somewhere we belong without having to fit their mold." I put the car in gear and eased onto the road, the lights of the Hallberg mansion shrinking behind us. "I'm proud of you both," I told them. "Tonight, you showed everyone what family really means." When we arrived at our apartment, the tension of the evening dissolved into laughter. Layla clambered onto the couch, the envelope clutched like a treasure map. She carefully unfolded the deed again, marveling at the address. "Will there be squirrels?" she asked, eyes bright. I laughed. "There will be whatever you want, maybe an entire zoo." She grinned and hugged the papers to her chest. "I can't wait to explore." Talia poured hot cocoa into 3 mismatched mugs and settled between us. Steam curled above our heads like wraiths of expectation released. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," she said, tracing the rim of her mug with a fingertip. "I wasn't sure I had the guts to follow through." I took her hand. "You did what had to be done," I said. "Because of you, she'll never wonder if she mattered." Layla leaned forward, eyes shining in the lamplight. "Can we move now?" she asked. I ruffled her curls. "We can start packing tomorrow." That night, sleep came easily, dreams of wide-open fields and new paint colors dancing behind my eyelids. In the morning, I awoke to sunlight slanting through our curtains and the scent of cinnamon in the air. Layla was already at the kitchen table, the envelope spread out like a centerpiece. She pointed to the trust document. "I want to learn everything I can," she said. "Physics, history, art, everything." My chest swelled with pride. "And you will," I promised. "Your education is as limitless as your imagination." Over the next weeks, packing became an adventure. We sorted through boxes, deciding which memories to take and which to leave behind. Layla tucked her favorite storybooks into a small crate. I wrapped them in tissue paper, careful not to smudge the ink. Talia labeled furniture for donation, her eyes misty at each familiar piece. I watched her with admiration, how she balanced justice with compassion, action with grace. Cynthia's calls came sporadically. She left a voicemail, "We're here if you need anything." The words sounded hollow. I considered returning the call but decided we had enough on our plates. This new chapter wasn't about apologies. It was about building something authentic. Instead, I replied to Talia's text, "Not this time." She read it and smiled, the tension easing from her shoulders. On moving day, the sky was a calm blue canvas, the air crisp with the promise of promise. Friends from our neighborhood helped load the truck, offering hugs and well wishes. Layla stood beside me as the last box went in. She placed the cream-colored envelope into my hand and said, "Thank you." I tucked it into my jacket pocket. "Thank you for trusting us," I replied. As we climbed into the cab of the moving van, Talia pressed her head to my shoulder. Layla climbed into the back seat of our car, her curls bobbing as she waved goodbye to the apartment that had been home. I started the engine and guided the van onto the highway, our little caravan of possibility. We drove into the unknown together, hearts full and spirits free. In that moment, I knew we weren't just moving houses. We were planting roots for a life defined not by expectations, but by our own choices. Choices made in love, sealed in courage, and meant to be opened last. The morning after we left, I woke to the sound of birdsong instead of carolers' laughter. Sunlight filtered through new curtains I'd installed the night before, painting stripes of gold across the bedroom floor. Talia was already up, sipping coffee at our kitchen table, a stack of moving boxes behind her like sentinels guarding our fresh start. Layla patted in moments later, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, Rosie, and wearing pajamas that bore traces of last night's hot cocoa. She climbed into my lap as I joined them, and I could feel the peaceful energy humming around our little family, an energy that came from choice rather than obligation. Over breakfast, we exchanged ideas for the day, labeling boxes, assembling bedroom furniture, scouting the yard for the perfect spot to hang the tire swing we'd promised Layla. She bounced ideas off us like confetti, her excitement contagious. After she scattered to unpack her art supplies, Talia and I lingered at the table. I watched her as she sipped her coffee, the faint lines at the corner of her eyes softening in contentment. "She's doing so well," I said. "Better than I ever imagined." Talia reached across the table and took my hand. "She's always been strong," she replied. "We just gave her the chance to show it." While Talia measured the walls for shelving, I carried a stack of boxes to the living room and began erecting the bookshelf I'd purchased months ago in anticipation of this move. As I hammered the last nail, I thought back to the evening of the envelope, the shift in the room's energy, the way power realigned itself with a simple act of love. It struck me then, and again now, that freedom often arrives in the quiet aftermath of a bold choice. By midday, the house was alive with activity. Talia painted stripes on Layla's walls, transforming plain cream into a horizon of lavender and seafoam green. Layla hovered nearby, calling out suggestions, more stars in the corner, and a unicorn by the window. I anchored my new bookcase to the wall and stacked novels, textbooks, and picture books according to the order Layla specified, storybooks on the top shelf, science volumes below, and her favorite pencil case and sketchbook resting on the lowest shelf for easy reach. She clapped when I was done, and I lifted her onto the bottom shelf for a quick hug. Walter had finally earned the conversation he never had, and in doing so, he gifted us all a new beginning. As we walked back into the building, hand in hand, I carried with me the knowledge that the true measure of rank is not badges or clearances, but the strength of the relationships we build and the respect we share. Evelyn's worry settled over me like a winter fog the moment we stepped inside the Grangers' living room. Alara's mother sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped in her lap, eyes red-rimmed from tears and sleepless nights. She wore a simple blouse and slacks, the uniform of someone who had spent decades holding her family together. When she saw me, she rose, breath-hitching, and reached out as if she might cling to me. I stepped forward and took her hand, feeling its tremor. "You were right," Evelyn whispered, her voice breaking. He always had to be the biggest man in the room. The admission hung between us with startling vulnerability. She led me to the couch, motioning for me to sit beside her. Alara knelt at Evelyn's feet, head bowed, guilt etched into every line of her face. I sat, careful to give them space, leaning in as Evelyn unfolded her heart. "He never understood boundaries," she said, voice wavering. "Not with me, not with you, and certainly not with Jackson." She looked at me then, apology and relief shimmering in her eyes. I'm so sorry he put you through this. I should have stopped him. I shook my head, wanting her to release the burden of blame. You couldn't, I said gently. He's protective, but now he sees why I need silence when I say so, and why that silence can save lives. Alara wrapped her arms around her mother's waist, head resting against Evelyn's stomach. Evelyn's arms went around her, rocking her softly. I knelt beside them, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. The room was still, no clattering of mugs, no scribbled notes left by Walter, just the soft rise and fall of breath. I realized this was the first time we'd all been together without tension threading through every word. Alara looked up at me, tears glinting. I thought he was just protective, she whispered. Not dangerous. The words trembled with fresh awareness. I brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. Protection is an honor, I said. But when it crosses into control, it becomes a threat. She nodded, as if weighing the truth. Evelyn's gaze met mine, gratitude and apprehension intertwined. We'll rebuild, Evelyn said after a moment. Not just walls and doors, but trust. And together. She reached out, squeezing my hand. I smiled, warmed by her resolve. Together, I echoed. That night, as the house settled into hushed tranquility, Alara stayed at my side. We sat in the guest room, the red light unlit now, screens off, the lock in place. She leaned her head against my shoulder. I wrapped an arm around her, feeling her heartbeat slow, matching mine. She whispered, I saw you today. Commanding, calm. I'd never seen you like that. I kissed her temple. You don't just wear this uniform, I said softly. You are it. She lifted her head, eyes bright. And you taught me what it means to belong to a mission, to a marriage, to a family. In that quiet moment, no cuffs, no confrontation, just two people finding solid ground. I knew we were stronger than any crisis. Evelyn's acceptance, Alara's faith, and my own conviction had forged a bond that no breach of protocol could ever undo. We would move forward, building walls that protected rather than imprisoned, and doors that welcomed rather than shut out. Walter's fall from grace was swift and unrelenting. Within 48 hours of the hearing, he was stripped of his credentials, banned from all law enforcement databases, and placed on a federal watch list. His once proud title of Captain Granger evaporated, replaced by the sterile label subject under investigation. Alara and I watched from the small living room of our new officer housing as the news landed. Even in defeat, he carried himself with a warrior's dignity, shoulders back, head high, but the burden of humiliation weighed visibly on him. I felt a pang of sympathy and resolve. Painful as it was, these consequences were necessary to draw clear lines between personal vendettas and professional duty. We didn't talk about going back to the Granger home. Instead, we spoke of moving forward, no more tiptoeing around fragile egos or living in the shadow of his suspicions. Our future lay in the small apartment provided by the Joint Operations Command, modest, secure, and ours alone. The uniform racks in the hallway bore witness to our dual identities, soldier and spouse, and the reinforced locks on every door stood as silent guardians of our privacy. I unpacked the last box of gear and set it aside, grateful for this civilian space where I could remove my uniform and simply be Jackson Reed, husband and strategist. That evening, Alara and I sat together at the makeshift dining table, the glow of a single lamp casting warm light on our maps and blueprints. I spread out diagrams of the new ops desk I intended to build, heavy steel frame, biometric locks, Faraday-lined casing for secure devices. She traced the lines with her fingertip, eyes alight. No more surprise inspections, she said, half smiling. I laughed, relieved by her humor. No more midnight investigations by my favorite father-in-law, I teased. Her laugh tinkled, and for the first time in weeks, the tension between us melted completely away. The next morning, I set to work converting the spare bedroom into my command center. I removed the flimsy particle board desk the housing unit provided and replaced it with a custom assembly I drafted on secure servers back at the Pentagon. The frame arrived in unmarked crates, and I assembled it with methodical precision, tightening each bolt, calibrating each hinge, and testing each lock. When I mounted the triple monitor array and ran the network cables, the room transformed into a high-security hub worthy of joint ops. The red LED indicator above the door, wired into the primary power bus, pulsed steadily, a modern calling card announcing, "Authorized personnel only." Alara watched me work for hours, bringing me cups of coffee and snacks, occasionally offering suggestions for cable management or lighting placement. In those small acts of partnership, I saw how far we'd come. She no longer hesitated at my side, Instead, she leaned in, eager to understand the details of my work. I explained data encryption protocols, sector tracking algorithms, and the fail-safes built into every piece of hardware. She asked intelligent questions about redundancy measures, about balancing speed and security, and I realized that our union was not only personal but professional. Two minds forging a stronger team. When the desk was complete, we tested the system together. I initiated a secure line to a remote training server. Alara watched as encrypted packets streamed across the display. I ran a simulated operational drill, and we walked through each phase: threat detection, asset allocation, real-time command. By the end of the exercise, the monitors spooled logs and analytics, a testament to a seamless system. I shut everything down, power lights dimming, and turned to her. "Your turn," I said, gesturing to the second seat. She sat, fingers hovering above the keyboard, and executed a system check. "All clear," she reported, grinning. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of unity. This was as much her desk as mine. Word of the new command center spread quickly through our team. When they first arrived to drop off mission briefs, they paused at the door, eyebrows raised at the gleaming steel and locked perimeter. One of my lieutenants, Lieutenant Alvarez, knocked and stepped inside, giving a professional nod. "Major Reed," she said, examining the layout. "This is impressive. You've turned home into a fortress." I smiled modestly. "Necessary precautions," I replied. She shook her head, respect in her eyes. "No more questions about rank," she said quietly. "You've earned it." That evening, after the last briefing concluded, I shut down the system and joined Alara on the small sofa in our living area. We held hands in comforting silence, the hum of the city outside filtering through the double-glazed windows. "I've never felt more at home," she said softly. I kissed her forehead and squeezed her hand. "We built these walls together," I replied, "not to imprison us, but to protect us." A week later, a letter arrived for me, typed on official Department of Defense stationery and stamped with a small seal. I broke the wax and unfolded the document, a commendation for operational excellence and personal leadership under duress. It concluded with a line that made my chest swell: "Your efforts have set a new standard for adaptive security in domestic operations." I read it aloud to Alara, pride and relief coursing through my voice. She wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "You didn't need clearance to build that, just conviction." Our world had shifted irrevocably. Walter's watchlist placement meant he could no longer access databases or court-martial evidentiary rooms. But it also gave him time to reflect on how personal pride can cloud judgment. Alara took on the delicate task of maintaining contact with her father, inviting him to our home only when appropriate and ensuring he understood the boundaries we had established. Over shared dinners, he asked about the desk specifications, complimented its craftsmanship, and even offered to help secure the heavy door with his old locksmith friend from the precinct. It was a small overture, but it signaled real progress. A man who once viewed me as a fraud now sought to contribute to my mission. In the nights that followed, as I closed my eyes beside Alara, I felt a profound peace. We no longer spoke of going back. Instead, we dreamed of what lay ahead: new operations, expanding our team, and perhaps one day restoring Walter's faith in the sanctity of our work. I thought of the reinforced locks, the biometric scanners, and the pulsing red light, symbols of boundaries built with respect rather than fear. And I knew that, as long as we held firm to our shared convictions, no external threat, no matter how close, could ever breach the trust we had forged. In the quiet of our secure enclave, I reaffirmed the truth I'd discovered on day one. Real strength isn't measured by walls alone, but by the clarity of purpose within them. And as I drifted into sleep, the echo of that conviction pulsed through every circuit of our command center, guarding not just data, but the future we were building together. Today, I walk into that same briefing room, the one Walter thought was a setup, and lead a new generation of strategic operators through their first live simulation. The fluorescent lights hum softly overhead, illuminating rows of curved monitors and the polished conference table that once shook beneath Walter's boots. I pause at the entrance, straightening my uniform and adjusting my tie, feeling the weight of every mission I've commanded and every lesson I've learned. The door slides open with a quiet hiss, granting passage into the epicenter of national security, and I step across the threshold with confidence born of experience. At the head of the table, I see the team assembled, eager faces reflecting the glow of data feeds, hands poised on laptops calibrated for secure lines, and eyes fixed on the central display. Some wear freshly pressed uniforms, others sport civilian attire with discreet earpieces indicating their clearances. They look up as I enter, and a respectful silence falls, punctuated only by the soft breathing of the breathing masks in standby mode. I sweep the room with a nod. "Good morning, everyone," I say, voice steady and welcoming. It's a greeting I've delivered countless times, yet today it feels more personal, as though I'm inviting them into a legacy I fought to define. Behind me, the coach officer clicks a button and the display flickers to life. Satellite maps overlaid with live data streams, logistic pipelines highlighted in blue, threat vectors traced in red. "Team," I continue, "today's exercise is Operation Vanguard Shield. We're simulating a high-value asset extraction in a contested urban environment. You'll need to coordinate aerial drone support, cyber defense countermeasures, and ground unit deployments within a 20-minute window. Remember, timing and accuracy are everything." I watch as anticipation ripples through the group, furrowed brows, sharpened focus, pencils poised above notepads. I take my place at the console, tapping into the secure channel to initiate the simulation. The room dims slightly as the main monitors shift to a three-dimensional cityscape, narrow alleyways, tall mid-century buildings, and streets snaking between barricaded checkpoints. Every movement is rendered in vivid detail, from the streetlight shadows dancing across asphalt to the thermal blips of potential hostiles. The red LED above the door pulses once, twice, then settles into a steady glow, a silent reminder that this room, like my own ops desk at home, is protected territory. The team springs into action. Lieutenant Alvarez calls for drone deployment over Sector Charlie 12, her voice calm but urgent. I monitor the feed as the virtual UV banked over the digital skyline, its camera angle shifting to reveal the asset's position behind a reinforced barricade. Sergeant Patel on cyber defense identifies a hostile network intrusion attempt and issues a countercode sequence. I watch her fingers fly across the keyboard, nulling the threat vector within seconds. The hum of computing fans is a chorus of collective effort. At minute 7, Major Nguyen reports small arms fire in Sector Echo 17. I swivel to the table's touchscreen and highlight the coordinates, then project a live feed of ground units en route. "Alpha Team, adjust course to intercept," I instruct, voice crisp. The room responds in harmony. Tactical routes plotted, air support rerouted, medevac standby initiated. Each directive is met with immediate execution, the markers on the screen shifting in real time. It's a dance of strategy and technology, one I orchestrate yet trust entirely to the skill of my operators. During a brief lull in the action, I see a flash of movement at the back of the room. I recognize her instantly, Alara, leaning against the wall, arms crossed and proud smile playing at her lips. She's here to observe, a silent testament to how far we've come together. My chest tightens with gratitude and love, reminding me that every command I give, every posture I assume, matters to more than just the mission. It matters to her faith in me. I return my focus to the simulation, but I carry her presence like a shield at my back. By minute 15, the asset is in sight, a black-clad figure clutching a hard drive, darting between cover points. The drone hovers above, illuminating the path with infrared markers. Ground units fan out, crossing the final open zone to reach the target. The team's voices interlace. "Move up, on my 6, covering fire." Then, the final extraction point is in range, an armored transport rolling across the plaza. A single nod from me, and the medevac chopper flies into frame, lowering its line. The asset attaches the drive and is lifted out of harm's way as the teams secure the perimeter. The room erupts in quiet celebration, relieved exhalations, the click of keyboards winding down, nods of mutual respect. I project the debrief sequence on the display, metrics, timelines, areas for improvement, then turn to face the team. "Excellent work," I say, voice infused with genuine pride. "You demonstrated precision, adaptability, and teamwork under pressure. Those qualities define joint operations." They shift in their seats, the weight of accomplishment settling among them. I step away from the console and cross to the front of the room, where my desk sits beneath a framed photograph. I glance at the image, Alara standing behind me at the podium, hand gently clasping mine, the press room lights casting her silhouette in soft relief. In that moment, I'm reminded that real power doesn't need to raise its voice. It simply answers the call when the boots hit the ground. I return my gaze to the team. "Remember," I add, Our strength lies not in protocols or clearances, but in the trust we place in each other. Let's carry that forward. As the operators gather their gear and file out, armed with feedback and renewed confidence, I remain in place for a moment, absorbing the quiet hum of the room. The displays dim to standby, the door's red light pulses one last time, then fades to black. I press the control panel to reset the system, and the room returns to its neutral state, still, ready, waiting for the next mission. I linger by my desk until the final footsteps echo down the corridor. Then I pick up the photograph, dust the frame gently, and place it back in the exact spot where it catches the morning light. I straighten the chairs, secure the files in the drawer, and adjust the locks on the cabinets. My uniform remains crisp, my composure intact. I take one last look around the room that once seemed impenetrable only to Walter, and I offer a silent salute to every challenge I've overcome. Turning toward the door, I step out into the corridor, the pulse of the Pentagon's heartbeat echoing through the halls. Alara waits for me at the end, her hand slipping into mine as I emerge. Together, we walk forward, partners in life, partners in duty, toward the next chapter we will write, fortified by every boundary we have built and every promise we have kept.